Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Talk community, the podcast where we help you become more confident, more fluent, and more comfortable speaking English every day. I'm Julia, your host, and I'm so happy you're here with me today. Whether you're listening while commuting, cooking, walking your dog, or just taking a break, thank you for making time to learn and grow with us. This podcast is all about real English, real stories, and real people from all around the world, just like you, who are on their journey to speak English with more ease and confidence. We know how difficult and frustrating it can feel sometimes. You understand what people say, you've studied the grammar, you know the vocabulary, and yet, when it's time to speak, something stops you. Something holds you back. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Let me start with a simple question. Have you ever stayed silent in an English conversation because you were afraid of saying something wrong? Maybe you were in class and you wanted to answer the teacher's question. But then your heart started beating fast and you told yourself, what if I make a mistake? So you stayed quiet. Or maybe you were traveling and someone asked you something in English, and although you understood the question, you just smiled and nodded, hoping they wouldn't ask anything else. Maybe this happened during a Zoom meeting at work, or while chatting with a new friend, or even while practicing with a language exchange partner. You are not alone. So many English learners, maybe even most of them, have experienced this. That fear of making a mistake, of sounding silly, of not being understood, or of being judged. It's a very human experience. We all want to be understood. We all want to sound smart, capable, and clear. And when we're learning a language, it's so easy to feel like our mistakes define us, like they're a sign that we're not good, enough, or not ready yet to speak. But let me tell you something really important right from the start. Mistakes are part of the process. They are not the opposite of learning. They are learning. And in this episode, we're going to explore that deeply. We're going to talk about why so many of us are afraid to speak, where that fear comes from, and most importantly, how to move through it, step by step. You'll hear real stories from people just like you, people from different countries, different ages, different backgrounds, who faced that same fear, but found ways to speak anyway. You'll hear about Haruto from Japan, who avoided speaking in meetings because he thought people would laugh at his English. You'll hear about Carla from Brazil, who had an embarrassing moment in a supermarket that changed everything for her. You'll hear how Layla from Egypt learned to trust her voice by sending herself short voice notes every day. These stories are here to remind you that progress comes when we are brave enough to take action, even when we're not perfect. In this episode, I'm also going to share with you simple and practical tips you can use today, not tomorrow, not next year, but today, to start speaking with less fear. I'm not here to tell you that you'll never feel nervous. That's not realistic. But I will show you how to change the way you think about mistakes and how to turn fear into curiosity. We'll talk about how to build confidence with small wins, how to use short and effective sentences that get your message across clearly, and how to shift your mindset from what if I get it wrong to what if they understand me anyway. This episode isn't about speaking perfect English. It's about speaking English without fear. And that starts with giving yourself permission to show up as you are, with your accent, your grammar mistakes, your pauses, your real human voice. Because English is not owned by a single group of people. It's a global language, and you are part of this global conversation. So, before we jump into the first story, I want you to take a deep breath with me. Really, wherever you are, inhale slowly and exhale. Now think of one situation where you could speak English, but you often hold back. Maybe at work, maybe in class, maybe online. Keep that situation in mind as we go through this episode. Let that be your focus today. Not to be perfect, just to be brave, just to try. Also, a quick reminder. If this podcast helps you in any way, please consider subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform. It helps more people around the world discover the English Talk community, and it shows us that this kind of content is valuable to you. If you know someone who's learning English and struggling with fear of speaking, share this episode with them. You never know, it might be exactly what they need to hear. All right, let's get started. Let's talk about what really causes that fear of speaking English, and why so many smart, capable, talented people feel stuck when they try to open their mouths and speak. You're not alone in this. And today, we're going to face that fear together. Let's talk honestly for a moment. Why is it so common to feel afraid of making mistakes when speaking English? Why do people all over the world, no matter where they're from, how old they are, or how much they've studied, often freeze up or stay silent when they have the chance to speak? This fear is incredibly common, and it's not just in your head, it's not just you. Language anxiety is real. In fact, there's even a name for it in research: foreign language anxiety. It's been studied by psychologists and linguists for years, and it affects millions of learners worldwide. Studies show that language anxiety can impact not only your ability to speak, but also how much you remember, how well you understand what others say, and even how motivated you feel to keep learning. So if you've ever felt your heart race, your mind go blank, or your mouth refuse to open when it's time to speak English, you're in good company. Many learners feel exactly the same. The fear of making mistakes is often connected to something deeper: the fear of being judged. We worry that if we say something wrong, people will laugh, that we'll look foolish, that others will think we're not intelligent, not capable, or not educated enough. And in some cultures, this fear can be even stronger because education systems often emphasize perfection, memorization, and getting the right answer instead of communication, creativity, or experimentation. So from a very young age, many of us are taught that mistakes are bad, and that it's safer to stay quiet than to risk being wrong. Now imagine learning a language in that environment. You're not just learning new words and grammar. You're also carrying years of conditioning that tells you, don't speak unless you're sure you're correct. That's a heavy weight to carry into every conversation. And it creates a kind of mental block. Even when you know the right words, your brain hesitates. You second-guess yourself. You feel embarrassed before you even open your mouth. I remember a listener once sent me a message from Poland. Her name was Natalia. She said that every time she had to speak English in a meeting, she felt like she was being tested. She was afraid her colleagues would think she wasn't qualified just because her grammar wasn't perfect. Even though she had great ideas and a strong opinion, she often stayed quiet. After the meeting, she would go home and replay the conversation, in her head, thinking about all the things she could have said if she weren't so afraid of making a mistake. Can you relate to that? That feeling of walking away from a conversation with regret, not because you didn't have anything to say, but because you didn't feel confident enough to say it? And this happens everywhere: in Argentina, in Korea, in Morocco, in Turkey, in Vietnam, in Italy, in Indonesia. All around the world, people feel the same pressure. If I make a mistake, people will laugh. If I don't sound perfect, people will judge me. But here's something important to remember: the people who judge are not the people you want to impress. And most of the time, people are not judging you at all. They're just trying to understand you. And many of them, especially other language learners, are rooting for you. They know how hard it is. They've been there too. Also, consider this. How do you feel when someone tries to speak your native language and makes a few mistakes? Do you laugh at them? Do you think less of them? Probably not. In fact, you probably feel impressed or even inspired. You probably admire their effort. So why would English speakers feel any different about you? We tend to judge ourselves more harshly than we judge others. Our internal critic is louder than any real audience. And that inner voice, the one that says, don't say that, it might be wrong, it's trying to protect us, but it also holds us back. And sometimes that fear isn't even from other people. It's from ourselves. We want to sound fluent. We want to sound like a native speaker. We imagine this perfect version of ourselves, speaking with a beautiful accent, saying everything correctly, and never hesitating. And anything less than that feels like failure. But that image of perfection is not only unrealistic, it's unnecessary. You don't need to be perfect to be effective. You don't need a native accent to be understood. And you don't need to wait until you feel ready to start speaking. In fact, waiting for that moment might mean waiting forever. I once had a conversation with Amir, a student from Iran who had studied English for almost 10 years. He told me he still didn't feel confident speaking, and when I asked why, he said, because I still make mistakes. When I asked him how often he practiced speaking, he admitted that he didn't speak much at all, because of that fear. So I asked him, if you never practice speaking because you're afraid of making mistakes, how will you ever stop making them? There was a pause, and then he smiled. He got it. That's the paradox. We avoid speaking because we're afraid of making mistakes, but without speaking, we'll never improve. Fear of mistakes is also fueled by past experiences. Maybe someone corrected you in a harsh way. Maybe you had a teacher who made you feel embarrassed in class. Maybe someone laughed when you mispronounced a word. Those memories stay with us. They shape our confidence, even as adults. But those moments don't define you. They are just one part of your story. And you have the power to write the next chapter differently. Finally, let's not forget the pressure of comparing ourselves to others. In the age of social media and YouTube, we see videos of people speaking English fluently and confidently. We see influencers giving perfect speeches and sharing perfect grammar tips, and we think, why can't I speak like that? But we don't see their full journey. We don't see the years of mistakes, practice, fear, repetition, and slow progress that got them there. Comparing your beginning or your middle to someone else's highlight reel is never fair. And it only feeds the fear. So when we ask, why is fear of mistakes so common? And the answer is simple. Because we are human. Because we care. Because we want to be understood. And because we're learning something new. Something that takes courage, vulnerability, and a lot of patience. And the good news is that fear doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're growing. And the more we understand that fear, the more power we have to move through it. Let me introduce you to someone who represents what so many learners experience. His name is Haruto, and he's from Japan. Haruto is an engineer, quiet, intelligent, and extremely dedicated to his work. He works for a global technology company that has offices in several countries, including the United States, Germany, India, and Brazil. His team is international, and many of their meetings are held in English. But for a long time, Haruto barely spoke during these meetings. Now let me be clear, Haruto understands English very well. He reads technical reports, writes detailed emails, and has even taken several courses in English. His grammar is strong. His vocabulary is more than enough for everyday conversation. And yet, when it came to speaking during meetings, especially when there were native speakers present, Haruto stayed quiet. He would take notes, listen carefully, and sometimes type comments in the chat, but he avoided unmuting his microphone. He avoided giving updates out loud. And if someone asked him a question directly, he would answer as quickly as possible, using the fewest words he could. Why? Because Haruto was afraid that if he made a mistake, people would think he wasn't professional. He believed that speaking with imperfect English, or hesitating while searching for a word, would make him seem less intelligent or less capable. He told himself, I'm not ready. I don't want to look bad. I'll just wait until my English is better. So he waited, and waited. And during that time, he missed several opportunities. One of those missed opportunities happened about a year into his role at the company. A new global project was being launched, and the team needed someone to represent the Tokyo office. It was a leadership opportunity, and Haruto's technical experience made him a perfect candidate. His manager even mentioned him as a possible choice. But during the team discussion, when they asked who would feel comfortable presenting updates, in English, Haruto stayed silent. He looked down at his notebook and waited for someone else to speak. Another colleague volunteered, and the opportunity passed him by. After the meeting, Haruto felt disappointed in himself. Not because someone else got the chance, but because he knew he had the skills. He knew he could have done it, if only. The presentation were in Japanese. But the fear of making a small mistake in English had convinced him he wasn't ready. And this wasn't the first time that had happened. Over the months, Haruto started to see a pattern. He was avoiding visibility. He was holding himself back, not because of his professional abilities, but because of the language barrier in his mind. One day, during a one-on-one meeting with his manager, Haruto finally opened up. He explained that he often didn't speak during meetings because he didn't want to say something wrong. His manager was surprised. He told Haruto that no one expected perfect English, and that in fact, many team members appreciated when someone explained things in a clear and simple way. He also reminded Haruto that his silence could be misinterpreted. People might assume he wasn't engaged or didn't have input, when in reality, he had a lot to say but was simply afraid to say it out loud. That conversation stayed with Haruto. He realized that by trying to avoid mistakes, he was also avoiding growth. And worse, he was giving others control over how they perceived him. So he decided to take a small step forward. The next week, during a team call, Haruto prepared one short update in advance. He wrote it down, practiced saying it out loud a few times, and when his turn came, he unmuted his microphone and shared his update. His voice trembled slightly, and he paused once to remember a word. But he did it. And do you know what happened? People thanked him. Someone even commented that they appreciated how clearly he explained the issue. That small success gave Haruto a new kind of confidence. He started preparing small updates before each meeting, just a few sentences at a time. He didn't aim for perfection, just clarity. If he didn't know a word, he found another way to say it. If he made a grammar mistake, he kept going. And little by little, things changed. 6 months later, Haruto was asked to lead a short technical presentation for a client team in Singapore. It was a 10-minute slot, and he almost said no. The old fear returned for a moment, but then he remembered what his manager had told him, that clarity matters more than perfection, and that silence can be misunderstood. So he said yes. He prepared his key points, practiced out loud, and delivered his presentation with calm, steady focus. Was it perfect? No. But was it effective? Absolutely. After the meeting, a senior engineer from another team reached out to Haruto privately and said, "That was a great explanation. You made a complex issue very easy to understand." That one comment meant the world to him. It wasn't just about praise. It was about being seen, being heard, being recognized not only for his technical skills, but also for his courage to speak, despite the fear. Haruto's story is not about becoming the most fluent English speaker in the room. It's about realizing that fluency isn't a requirement for participation. That mistakes don't erase your expertise. That professionalism isn't about having perfect grammar. It's about showing up, being prepared, and communicating with honesty and effort. And once Haruto understood that, he stopped letting fear make decisions for him. If you've ever felt like Haruto, afraid to speak up because you think your English isn't good enough, I want you to remember this. Your voice matters. Your ideas matter. And the only way to get better is to start where you are. Not when you're perfect. Not when the fear disappears. But now, even if your hands shake a little. Even if your grammar isn't perfect. Even if you have to pause mid-sentence. Because each time you speak, even if it's just a few words, you're building the confidence that will carry you to the next level. Let's clear something up right now. Your English does not need to be perfect. It never did. It never will. And most importantly, no one actually expects it to be perfect. Not even native speakers. This idea that you need flawless grammar, perfect pronunciation, and a wide, sophisticated vocabulary before you can speak with confidence is one of the biggest myths in language learning. It's a belief that holds people back, creates fear, and blocks communication. But it's simply not true. I want you to imagine something for a second. Think about someone you know who speaks your native language fluently, maybe a friend, a coworker, or even a family member. Now ask yourself, do they speak perfectly? Probably not. They pause. They repeat themselves. They use slang. They start sentences and don't finish them. They interrupt. Sometimes they even forget words or mispronounce them. And yet, you understand them. You don't question their intelligence or their ability to communicate. That's because human communication is not about perfection. It's about connection. The same is true with English. Being fluent doesn't mean being flawless. It means being able to express yourself in a way that other people understand. That's the real goal. And yes, of course, we want to improve over time. Better grammar, better pronunciation, better vocabulary. But those things grow with use. They don't need to be perfect before you open your mouth. I've met people from all over the world who speak English confidently and successfully in their careers, in their studies, and in their social lives. And guess what? They still make mistakes. Maria, a project manager from Colombia, often forgets to use the past tense when she's excited. She'll say things like, "Yesterday I go to the meeting," and you know what? No one cares. Her team understands her perfectly. They know what she means. And she communicates clearly and effectively because she focuses on what matters, getting her message across. Then there's Ahmed, a software developer from Egypt. He speaks with a strong accent, and sometimes he struggles with articles like the and a. He might say we need to fix bug in code instead of we need to fix the bug in the code. But his communication is efficient. His colleagues respect him. His clients trust him. He never lets a small grammar mistake stop him from participating. And over time, those small mistakes happen less and less. Not because he studied more, but because he kept using the language. Even native speakers make mistakes. Let me say that again. Even native speakers. They mix up less and fewer. They forget irregular past tense verbs. They say things like, I seen that movie instead of I've seen that movie. They invent words, they break grammar rules, and still no one doubts that they're fluent. So why do language learners hold themselves to a higher standard than native speakers? Why do we think we're not allowed to speak unless every sentence is perfect? There's this idea, especially in formal education systems, that grammar is everything. That if you make a mistake, you're not good enough. That's a mindset created in classrooms and reinforced by tests and textbooks. But outside of school, in the real world, communication matters more than accuracy. People want to know what you think, how you feel, what you can do, and how you can help. They are not sitting there judging every verb tense or every article you use. Most of the time, they don't even notice. I remember talking to Elena, a graphic designer from Italy. She told me she spent years studying English grammar before she ever tried to speak. She knew all the tenses, could identify conditionals and phrasal verbs, but when someone asked her a question in English, she froze. Her brain was so busy checking for errors that she couldn't relax and speak naturally. It wasn't until she started practicing simple conversations about things like her daily routine, her favorite movies, or her weekend plans that she began to gain confidence. She stopped worrying about sounding perfect and started focusing on being understood. That changed everything. Fluency comes from practice, not perfection. It comes from using the language regularly in real situations with real people. It's okay if your sentences aren't grammatically perfect. It's okay if you forget a word and have to describe it another way. That's not failure. That's fluency in action. It's creative. It's flexible. It's human. I once met Thomas, an English teacher from Canada, who had lived in Brazil for years. He told me something that really stuck with me. He said, "The best English learners I've ever met weren't the ones who got everything right. They were the ones who weren't afraid to get things wrong." Think about that for a second. The best learners weren't perfect. They were brave. They were willing to try, to make mistakes, to learn in real time. This mindset shift from I need to speak perfectly to I need to be understood is the key to real growth. When you accept that mistakes are part of the journey, you stop being afraid of them. You start using the language more. You speak in meetings, you ask questions, you tell your story. And with each interaction, you get stronger, more confident, and more natural. I also want to point out that the way people judge your English often has more to do with your confidence than your grammar. If you speak with confidence, even if you make a few mistakes, people will focus on your message. But if you hesitate, apologize, or look unsure, they might focus more on how you're saying something than what you're saying. Confidence communicates more than words ever can. So the next time you're about to speak, and that little voice in your head says, "Wait, this might not be correct," I want you to respond with, "That's okay, I'm going to say it anyway." Because if you wait for perfection, you'll wait forever. But if you speak with what you have, you'll grow. And your English will improve naturally over time. Here's one of the most powerful mindset shifts you can make when it comes to speaking English. Stop imagining that you're being tested. Stop imagining that you're in front of a teacher or a classroom. And start imagining that you're just talking to a friend, someone who already knows you, someone who isn't judging you, someone who just wants to hear what you have to say. Because here's the truth. When you speak like you're talking to a friend, everything changes. Your voice becomes more natural. Your words flow more easily. Your mind relaxes. And most importantly, you stop focusing so much on whether every word is correct, and you start focusing on communication. That's where real fluency begins. I want you to picture this. Let's say you're learning English and you meet two different people on the same day. The first person is an English teacher. They're kind, but you know their job is to listen carefully to your grammar and pronunciation. You sit up straight. You think hard about every sentence. You pause before speaking. You correct yourself mid-sentence. You're not relaxed. You're trying to perform. Now, the second person is someone your age, from another country, and they're just curious about who you are. They don't care if you make a grammar mistake. They just want to know what your favorite music is, what food you like, or what your country is like. With this person, you laugh. You forget about your accent. You don't worry about perfect sentence structure. You just talk. See the difference? One feels like a test. The other feels like a connection. That's why this tip is so important. When you speak English, whether it's in a meeting, a message, a class, or even on a podcast, try to approach it like a conversation between friends. Let me show you exactly how this plays out. Imagine I want to say something simple like introducing myself. If I'm thinking like a student, I might say, "Good afternoon, my name is Julia. I am from the United States of America. I am currently working as a language coach." Now that's perfectly fine. It's correct. But it sounds a bit stiff, right? It sounds like I'm trying to get a good grade. Now listen to the difference if I speak like I'm talking to a friend. "Hey, I'm Julia. I'm from the US. I work with language learners and help people feel more confident speaking English." Same message, but now it's relaxed, natural, there's energy, and there's no pressure to be perfect. That tone helps people feel more connected to you, and it helps you feel more confident while speaking. Let me tell you about Roberto, a logistics coordinator from Argentina. Roberto told me he always felt nervous when he had to speak English at work. He said he prepared everything in advance, wrote scripts, memorized lines, but during calls, he still felt frozen. One day, he started imagining that every person on the call was just a friend he was having coffee with. He even smiled before speaking, just to remind his body to relax. And you know what happened? His tone changed. His words became simpler, more direct, more natural. And even though he still made the occasional mistake, his confidence grew. People started responding to him more warmly. His team noticed that he was participating more, and it all started with that small change, treating the conversation like it was between friends. This works in informal and formal settings. Yes, even at work. Because no matter how formal the environment, people still respond better to clear, natural language. You don't need big academic words. You don't need to impress anyone. You need to be understood. That's it. And when you speak like you're talking to a friend, your listener feels more comfortable too. It's easier for both of you. Another thing this mindset shift does is reduce the pressure. We often put so much pressure on ourselves when we're speaking a second language. We want to sound smart, fluent, impressive. But when we imagine the conversation as one between friends, the pressure drops. You're no longer trying to pass the test. You're just trying to share your ideas, your opinions, your experiences. That's when real conversation begins. This approach helped Daria, a college student from Ukraine who moved to Germany. She told me that during her first months in Berlin, she avoided speaking English because she was so focused on correctness. But she had a neighbor, an older woman from Turkey, who spoke to her in simple English every day. They talked about the weather, groceries, family. Daria said it felt like talking to her grandmother. And soon her English became more fluid. Not because she studied more, but because she felt safe to speak. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just having a friendly chat. So how can you practice this mindset? Start by imagining the face of a person who makes you feel relaxed. Maybe a best friend, a sibling, someone who smiles and listens when you speak. Picture them when you practice English, even if you're alone. When you read out loud, when you record yourself, or when you speak in real conversations, imagine that friendly listener. Speak to them, not to an imaginary grammar judge in your head. You can also use this technique during real conversations. Before your next English meeting or call, take a deep breath and say to yourself, "This is just a chat with a friend." Even if it's a work situation, remind yourself that everyone just wants to understand each other. You're not on stage, you're not being graded, you're just sharing ideas. Remember, fluency is about connection. When you remove the image of the teacher from your mind and replace it with the image of a friend, your whole energy shifts. You speak more clearly, more honestly, and with more personality. And that's exactly what real communication is about. Let me tell you about Carla, a student from Brazil who completely changed the way she approached English. And it all started with a moment in a supermarket. Carla was 22 when she moved to Vancouver, Canada, for a 6-month exchange program. She had studied English in school since she was a child. She knew grammar rules, could read well, and had passed several English exams. On paper, she looked fluent. But when she arrived in Canada, reality felt very different. She told me that during her first few weeks, she hardly spoke. She was nervous every time she needed to say something in English, even simple things like ordering food, asking for directions, or saying hello to someone in her building. The fear of making mistakes was always present. She worried people wouldn't understand her. She was afraid they would laugh or be confused. So instead of practicing, she stayed silent. She avoided small talk and tried to do everything by herself. Carla's host family was kind and supportive, but even at dinner, she kept her sentences short. She often smiled and nodded instead of joining the conversation. Her host mom, Sarah, once asked her, "Carla, how was your day?" And Carla just said, "Fine," even though she had a lot more she wanted to share. She later told me, "I knew the words. I just didn't have the courage to use them." Everything started to shift one afternoon at the local supermarket. Carla went there to buy ingredients for a Brazilian dessert she wanted to cook for her host family, brigadeiro. She had written a list, and most of the items were easy to find. But one thing was missing: sweetened condensed milk. She looked up and down the aisles, but she couldn't find it. Normally, she would have just given up and gone home. But this time, she took a breath and decided to ask for help. She found a store employee, a woman in her 30s, and approached her. Carla later told me she rehearsed the sentence in her mind 5 times before speaking. "Excuse me, I'm looking for sweet milk in a can. You know, for dessert?" It wasn't perfect. She didn't remember the exact word, but she smiled and tried. The woman blinked, then said, "Ah, you mean sweetened condensed milk? Yeah, it's in aisle 6. I can show you." Carla laughed and said, "Yes, that. Thank you." And they walked to the aisle together. On the way, the woman asked where Carla was from. They chatted briefly, and Carla even explained she was going to make a Brazilian dessert. That short conversation, just 2 or 3 minutes long, made a huge difference. Why? Because it was the first time Carla asked for something in English and got a positive response, even though she didn't speak perfectly. She made a mistake, used the wrong term, but still communicated her idea. And the other person understood her. No one laughed, no one corrected her, no one made her feel small. In fact, the woman was friendly and helpful. That experience stayed with Carla. It gave her a small but powerful message. She could be imperfect and still be understood. After that day, she started changing the way she approached English. She began to speak more, even when she wasn't sure about the correct words. She stopped overthinking every sentence. She focused on expressing herself, not impressing others. A few weeks later, she joined a conversation club at the local library. The first time, she only said a few things, but she kept coming back. She talked about movies, books, Brazilian food, and her favorite places in Vancouver. She still made grammar mistakes. She still had an accent. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that she was finally using the language, in real life, with real people. Carla told me something beautiful that I'll never forget. She said, "In the beginning, I thought English was something I had to perform, like on a test. But now I see it's just a tool, a way to connect. When I accepted that mistakes are part of learning, everything got easier." This shift didn't happen overnight. It was a process. But it began with a small choice: to speak up in a supermarket, to try, even with imperfect English. That moment gave her the confidence to try again. And each time she tried, her English got better. Not because she memorized new vocabulary or practiced pronunciation drills, but because she was using the language in real life, without the fear of being perfect. Her host family noticed the change too. She started telling stories at dinner. She made jokes. She shared her thoughts. One evening, they all sat around the table eating her homemade brigadeiro, and her host mom said, "Carla, your English has improved so much." Carla smiled and said, "It's because now I speak without fear." And everyone clapped. Not because she spoke perfectly, but because she had found her voice. That's the power of accepting mistakes. When you stop letting fear control your words, you give yourself the chance to grow. Carla didn't need more grammar books. She needed real conversations and the courage to be imperfect. One of the most common mistakes English learners make is thinking that longer, more complex sentences are better. That complicated structures will make them sound smarter, more fluent, more professional. But the truth is, simple sentences are often much more powerful. They're easier to say, easier to understand, and they reduce your chances of getting stuck or misunderstood. Today, I want to show you why embracing simplicity is one of the smartest things you can do to improve your spoken English. Let's start with a basic idea. The goal of language is communication, not perfection, not performance, just connection. When you use simple sentences, you give your listener a clear path to follow. There's no confusion, no guessing. They understand what you mean, and the conversation keeps moving. I've seen this again and again with learners around the world. I once worked with a young professional named Ahmed from Egypt. He worked in IT support and had to speak to international clients every day. In the beginning, he thought he needed to speak with long technical sentences to sound professional. He'd say things like, "I would like to inform you that we are currently in the process of investigating the issue that you have previously reported." And people would often pause or ask him to repeat. So we practiced breaking it down. I suggested something like, "We're checking the problem now. I'll update you soon." And just like that, everything became clearer. His clients responded more quickly. He felt more confident. And most importantly, he realized he didn't need to sound like a textbook. He just needed to be understood. Let's look at a few more examples to really show the power of simple sentences. Take this phrase. "It is of utmost importance that the files be submitted by the deadline." Now, this is grammatically correct, but it's heavy. It sounds formal and a little unnatural in most conversations. You could just say, "Please send the files before the deadline." Same message. Less confusion. Or consider this one. "I would be extremely grateful if you could kindly consider the possibility of rescheduling our meeting." Again, perfectly polite, but too long. Try, "Can we reschedule the meeting?" Clear, direct, friendly. When you use simple sentences, you also reduce the chance of making mistakes. Longer sentences often require more complicated grammar like conditionals, modal verbs, or passive voice. And when you're under pressure, like in a meeting or a conversation with a stranger, it's easy to get lost in the middle of your own sentence. Here's something else I want you to remember. Native speakers use simple sentences all the time. In fact, some of the clearest communicators in English are the ones who speak simply. Think about international leaders, motivational speakers, or news reporters. They don't use complex grammar to impress people. They use everyday language. Why? Because it reaches more people. It includes more people. And that's exactly what you want when you're speaking a second language. Now let me tell you about Ayaka, a fashion student from Japan who moved to London for a design internship. She was very focused on being polite in English, which is a wonderful quality, but she often overcomplicated her speech. For example, when a coworker asked if she wanted a coffee, she once replied, "I don't think I would like to trouble you by requesting something for myself at this time." The coworker just blinked and said, "So, no?" They both laughed. After that, she started practicing shorter answers. "No thanks. I'm good." "Yes, please." She told me later, "I thought short answers sounded rude, but actually, they're just natural." That small shift made her conversations smoother and helped her feel more like part of the team. Simple language isn't only useful in casual situations. It's just as effective in business, education, and even public speaking. In fact, many successful business presentations are written in plain English. Why? Because the goal is to make the audience understand, not to make them guess. Imagine you're in a job interview and they ask, "Tell me about yourself." You might feel the pressure to say something like, "I am an individual who is extremely passionate about the field of software engineering and have been deeply involved in multiple innovative projects that reflect my technical skills." That's okay. But you could also say, "I love software engineering. I've worked on several projects where I built useful tools and solved real problems." The second version feels human, clear, confident. I always remind my students that simple sentences also give you more space to breathe, literally. When you try to fit too many ideas into one sentence, you often run out of air or lose your place. But when you speak simply, one idea at a time, your rhythm improves. You feel more in control. Your pronunciation gets better. You sound more natural. This is especially helpful when you're nervous. In high-pressure moments, your brain works faster than your mouth. So breaking your speech into shorter thoughts helps you stay calm and focused. For example, instead of saying, "I've been meaning to talk to you about the proposal you sent last week because I think there are a few elements that could be improved," try this. "I read your proposal. It's good, I have a few ideas to make it better. That's the same message. Less stress, better delivery. And here's something I find beautiful. When you speak simply, people listen more closely. They don't get distracted by complicated words. They hear your message. Your personality comes through more clearly. You seem more honest, more confident, and more approachable. So the next time you're about to say something in English, ask yourself, can I make this simpler? Not less meaningful, not less polite, just clearer. That one habit can completely transform the way you speak. And you'll be surprised how often a short, simple sentence is exactly what your listener needs. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in your English learning journey is to stop seeing mistakes as something bad and start seeing them as proof that you're learning. Every time you try to speak and get something wrong, you're not failing. You're growing. You're experimenting. You're discovering how the language works. And you're building the confidence you need to keep going. In this episode, I want to help you change the way you see your mistakes and show you what really happens when you stop fearing them and start embracing them. Let me start with something simple. Think about how children learn to speak. When a toddler says, "I go to the park," what happens? The adults smile. Maybe they gently say, "You mean, you went to the park?" But no one gets angry. No one tells the child to stop speaking until their grammar is perfect. We understand that mistakes are part of learning. It's not just accepted, it's expected. Now, the same thing applies when you're learning a second language. You are going to say things the wrong way sometimes. You'll use the wrong tense. You'll forget a word. You'll pronounce something oddly. That's okay. In fact, that's necessary. Every mistake you make is a small lesson. Every awkward conversation is a step forward. I remember speaking with Elias, a man from Greece who had lived in the UK for 2 years. He told me that, at first, he hated making mistakes. Every time someone corrected his English, he felt embarrassed. He started avoiding conversations, especially with native speakers. But over time, he noticed something interesting. When he did make a mistake, most people didn't laugh. They didn't judge him. In fact, they tried to help. They waited patiently. They sometimes repeated his sentence with the correct grammar, but in a kind way. And more importantly, the conversation continued. This helped him realize something important. The fear of making mistakes was louder in his own mind than it was in the real world. He started saying to himself after every conversation, "Did I make a mistake, or did I learn something new today?" And suddenly, mistakes became opportunities. Every error was a new note in his mental notebook, and each one helped him improve. I want you to try using that same question. Did I make a mistake, or did I learn something new today? Say it after you finish a phone call in English. Say it after you ask a question in class. Say it after you write an email or have a quick chat with a friend. Because the truth is, most of the time, those mistakes are teaching you far more than a perfect sentence ever could. I've spoken to many learners around the world who shared this exact fear, the fear of being wrong. And I always ask them, what's the worst thing that could happen? Will someone yell at you? Probably not. Will they walk away? Unlikely. In most cases, especially in casual conversations, native speakers are incredibly understanding. They know how hard it is to speak another language. Some of them have tried it themselves. They appreciate the effort. They respect your courage. And they usually want to help. Let me give you a real example. Last year, a listener named Thondi from South Africa sent me a voice message. She works in tourism and often talks to international visitors in English. She said that for years she tried to hide her mistakes. She would prepare every sentence in advance and panic if someone asked her a question she didn't expect. But one day, she simply said, "Sorry, I don't know the word in English, but I can explain." And she used her hands, gave examples, and described the things she meant. The visitor smiled and said, "Oh, I get it." That moment changed everything for her. She realized that speaking English is not about having the perfect words all the time. It's about making the other person understand you, even if that means using gestures, synonyms, or pausing to think. From that day on, she started to enjoy her conversations more. She took more risks. She tried new words. Sometimes she got them wrong, but she stopped letting fear control her. And her English improved more in 6 months than it had in the previous 2 years. That's the magic of embracing mistakes. When you accept that they are part of the process, you stop wasting energy on being perfect and start using that energy to explore, connect, and grow. You become a better listener because you're no longer stuck in your own head, worrying about grammar. You become a more confident speaker because you realize that communication is messy, and that's okay. Let's look at a small exercise. Try to think of 3 mistakes you've made recently in English. Maybe you used the wrong word. Maybe you forgot how to say something. Maybe someone corrected your pronunciation. Now, instead of feeling embarrassed, ask yourself, what did I learn from that moment? Maybe now you remember the right word. Maybe now you understand how to pronounce it better. That's growth. That's progress. One of my favorite ways to reframe mistakes is to call them discoveries. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, try saying, I discovered something new about English today. Maybe you discovered how not to say something. That's still progress. Maybe you discovered that people still understand you even when you don't say it perfectly. That's powerful. Also encourage you to celebrate your mistakes. Yes, really. The next time you say something wrong and someone helps you correct it, smile and say, thanks, now I know. Treat it like a victory, because that moment of correction is a gift. It's someone giving you feedback that will help you next. Time. In fact, some of the most confident speakers I know are also the ones who made the most mistakes. Not because they're less intelligent, but because they're more willing to try. They speak more. They ask more questions. They test more ideas. And because of that, they learn faster. They grow faster. They enjoy the process more. So if you ever feel like quitting because you said something wrong, remember, you didn't fail. You just discovered another piece of the puzzle. Keep collecting those pieces. Every one of them brings you closer to fluency. Let me tell you a story that always makes me smile. It's the kind of story that shows how a small mistake, instead of being something to feel embarrassed about, can become a funny memory that actually helps you grow. It's about Alex, a software developer from Germany, who had just moved to New York for work. He had been studying English for years, and his grammar was quite good. He read technical articles in English, watched TV shows with subtitles, and even practiced on language learning apps. But he had very little experience actually speaking English in everyday situations. One evening, a few weeks after he arrived in the city, Alex decided to treat himself to dinner at a local Italian restaurant near his apartment. It was a cozy, family-run place with red and white tablecloths, warm lighting, and the delicious smell of garlic and tomato sauce in the air. He sat down at a small table and looked at the menu. He was hungry, and after a long day at work, he thought pizza sounded perfect. Now, Alex had studied a lot of food vocabulary, but in that moment, something got a little mixed up in his mind. He called the waiter over and with a confident smile said, I would like to order a large pepperoni and extra embarrassment. The waiter blinked, paused, and tilted his head. Excuse me? He asked, not quite sure he'd heard correctly. Alex repeated, yes, please. Large pepperoni and embarrassment. Extra embarrassment, please. There was a long silence. And then the waiter started laughing. Not in a mean way, but in the way someone laughs when something completely unexpected happens. He said, do you mean extra parmesan? Alex froze for a second, realized what he had just said, and his face turned bright red. He had confused the word parmesan with embarrassment. Both words had a similar sound in his head, especially because parmesan isn't used much in daily German conversation, and embarrassment had come up recently in one of his English lessons. The two got swapped in the heat of the moment. He laughed too, mostly out of surprise and nervousness. Yes, he said, still chuckling. Parmesan, not embarrassment, although I guess now I'm getting both. The waiter laughed again and said, don't worry, happens all the time. I'll bring your pizza with extra parmesan and no judgment. That little mistake, mixing up a cheese with a feeling, could have made Alex want to run out of the restaurant and never speak English again. But the way the waiter responded, with kindness and humor, helped Alex see the situation differently. That night, something clicked for him. He realized that making mistakes in English doesn't have to be shameful or stressful. Sometimes it just leads to a great story. And the best part? From that day on, he never forgot the word parmesan. That mistake made it stick in his memory more than any flashcard or vocabulary list ever could. And every time he told the story, which he did, To friends, coworkers, and even in a language class later, people laughed, shared their own funny stories, and felt more relaxed about making mistakes themselves. Alex told me later that this one small moment changed his whole relationship with English. Before the pizza incident, as he now calls it, he used to overthink every sentence. He would mentally rehearse what he wanted to say before opening his mouth. He often stayed quiet in social situations, afraid of using the wrong word or sounding strange. But after that night, he started speaking more freely. He gave himself permission to get things wrong sometimes. He even began playing little games with himself. When he went to the grocery store, he'd try to ask the staff for things using different phrases. If they didn't understand, he'd laugh and try again. At work, he started volunteering to give short updates in meetings. He would jot down keywords, but not write out full sentences. He trusted himself more, knowing that communication didn't have to be perfect. It just had to work. That shift in mindset, from avoiding mistakes to embracing them, helped his English improve faster than anything else he'd tried. And it made him more open, more social, more connected to the people around him. Language was no longer something to fear. It became something to play with, explore, and enjoy. I love this story because it shows how powerful one funny moment can be. We often think we need serious study and structured lessons to improve. And yes, those things matter. But confidence, connection, and a sense of humor are just as important. Alex didn't learn more grammar rules that night. He learned something more valuable. That it's okay to be imperfect. That being human, and even a little awkward, is part of learning something new. If you're listening to this and you've made a similar mistake, maybe you mixed up two words or said something strange without realizing it, I want you to know you're not alone. Everyone who learns a language has moments like this. In fact, these are the moments that often teach us the most. And if you can smile, learn, and move forward, you'll find that your English and your confidence will grow faster than ever. Alex still goes to that same restaurant from time to time. And every now and then the waiter will bring him his pizza and ask with a grin, "Extra embarrassment today?" And Alex will smile, shake his head, and say, "No thanks, just Parmesan." That little joke, born from one mix-up, became part of his English journey. A reminder that every mistake holds a lesson, and that every lesson brings you one step closer to fluency. One of the biggest blocks to speaking English with confidence is the pressure we put on ourselves. We imagine we have to be perfect, or that we need to impress others. And that pressure makes our brain freeze. We suddenly forget the words we assume we already know. We doubt ourselves. We stay silent. But what if there was a way to practice speaking without all that tension? What if you could train your brain to get comfortable with English in safe, everyday situations that don't feel stressful? That's exactly what I want to talk about with you today. Practicing in low-stress situations. These are moments in your daily life where you can use English without the fear of judgment. There's no boss watching, no test waiting, no big audience. Just you and a chance to try, learn, and grow a little each time. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're walking into a coffee shop. You look at the person behind the counter and say, "Hi, good morning. Can I get a coffee, please?" That's it. Just one sentence. But in that small moment, you are practicing English. You're using real vocabulary, your mouth is moving in the rhythm of the language, and most importantly, you're building confidence. Now maybe you already do this sometimes, or maybe you avoid it. Maybe you point at the menu instead of speaking. Maybe you nod instead of saying thank you. But I want to encourage you to start turning those small moments into opportunities. They may feel small, but they create real, lasting change. They help you become more familiar with the language in real life, where it matters most. Let's go a little deeper. Think about your daily routine. Do you have neighbors? Say hello in English. Even a simple "Hi, how are you?" counts as practice. Do you take public transport? Maybe greet the bus driver or practice reading the signs and announcements in English. These moments are low risk. No one expects long conversations. But they are golden opportunities to hear your own voice using the language in public. Another idea: talk to yourself. Yes, really. Talk to yourself in English when you're cooking, cleaning, getting dressed, or walking the dog. Describe what you're doing out loud. I'm making pasta. I'm washing the dishes. It's sunny today. This kind of self-talk helps you think in English, and it removes the pressure of other people listening. Some learners I've worked with find it helpful to use a mirror. They stand in front of it and pretend they're having a conversation. It sounds silly, but it's actually a great way to work on pronunciation, fluency, and expression. You can act out little scenes, ordering food, asking for directions, introducing yourself. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to get comfortable speaking without fear. And of course, in today's world, you don't have to be alone when you practice. You can talk to an AI like you're doing now by listening to this podcast. You can use language learning apps that let you speak, repeat, and respond. The best part is that there's no judgment. The AI doesn't laugh, doesn't interrupt, doesn't get impatient. You can repeat the same sentence 10 times, try new vocabulary, and experiment with your tone. It's a safe place to try again. One listener, Marisol from Mexico, told me she used to be terrified of speaking English at work. She works in customer service and has to take calls in English. At first, she avoided them or passed them to someone else. But then she started practicing every night at home with her AI assistant. She would pretend to be on a call and ask and answer questions out loud. Over time, those fake calls helped her feel more ready for the real ones. Now she handles English calls with much more confidence, not because she studied more grammar, but because she practiced speaking in a space where she felt no pressure. That's what these low-stress situations can do for you. They help you build mental and emotional strength. They train your mind to relax when it hears English. They make the language feel familiar instead of foreign or scary. And that's what creates fluency, not just knowing the words, but feeling calm and confident enough to use them when you need them. You don't have to wait for the perfect moment to start. You don't need a classroom. You don't need permission. You can start right now. Choose one low-pressure moment in your day and speak. Just one sentence. Maybe when you're brushing your teeth, you say, "I have a busy day today." Maybe when you're driving, you say, "The traffic is really bad." Maybe when you make your coffee, you say, "I love the smell of this." These are all practice. They are all valid. They are all helping you become the kind of speaker who isn't afraid of using English. Some people think practice only counts when it's hard, but that's not true. Easy practice is powerful. It trains your mind gently. It builds habits. It creates flow. And it prepares you for the harder moments, like interviews, presentations, or difficult conversations. So here's what I want you to do. Make a small list of 5 situations in your day that feel safe. Maybe it's talking to your pet, ordering at a cafe, greeting a coworker, or practicing with an AI chatbot. Choose one each day. Make it a tiny ritual. You can even keep a small notebook and write down what you said. It doesn't have to be long, just enough to keep the habit going. And remember, every time you speak, you are moving forward. Even if it's just one sentence, even if it's just one word, you are training your brain, you are building your skills. And over time, those little steps add up to something big. The key is consistency. One low-stress situation a day. That's all you need to start. Once you get comfortable in those small moments, the bigger ones will feel easier. You'll start noticing that you hesitate less, that you speak more naturally, and that you recover faster when you get stuck. So take the pressure off. Find the easy wins. Practice in places where no one is judging you. Build your confidence from the ground up. Because the truth is, fluency doesn't come from perfect grammar or big vocabulary. It comes from speaking again and again, especially when no one's watching. There's a question that many English learners ask themselves before they speak, and it's one that adds a lot of pressure, often without us realizing it. That question is, what if I make a mistake? Maybe you've asked yourself that many times. You're about to speak, and suddenly your brain jumps in with that little voice saying, what if I say it wrong? What if they don't understand me? What if I sound silly? That question creates fear. It makes your heart beat faster, your thoughts get stuck, and your mouth won't cooperate. It makes English feel like a test instead of a tool to connect with people. And today, I want to show you a very simple mental shift that can change everything. Instead of asking, what if I make a mistake? Try asking this, what if I get understood? It sounds like a small change, but it has a big impact. That new question focuses your mind on the goal. Communication. Not perfection, not grammar, not impressing anyone. Just being understood. Just getting your message across. And that is the real point of language. Let's take a moment to really feel the difference between the two questions. What if I make a mistake? Is a fear-based question. It makes your brain look for danger. It focuses on what could go wrong. Your imagination starts to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Maybe the other person will laugh. Maybe they'll correct you. Maybe they won't understand. And suddenly you feel nervous, even before opening your mouth. Now switch to, what if I get understood? This question opens your mind to possibility. It encourages hope instead of fear. It reminds you that communication is possible, even if your English isn't perfect. It's a gentle way to support yourself in the moment of speaking. And that matters, because language is not just about words, it's about emotion too. Let me tell you about Ravi from India. He moved to Canada for work, and even though he had studied English for years, he avoided speaking in meetings. Why? Because every time he was about to speak, he would hear that old question in his head, what if I make a mistake? It froze him. One day, after a team lunch, he decided to try something new. The next time he spoke, he told himself, what if they understand me? What if it's enough? He started small, giving short updates in meetings, speaking up once or twice. And little by little, he realized that yes, he did make mistakes sometimes, but people still understood him. They still listened. They still respected him. That small change in thinking gave him the courage to practice more. And the more he practiced, the more confident he became. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to speak. And here's something important to remember. Native speakers make mistakes too. They forget words. They use the wrong tense. They mix up names or get distracted mid-sentence. But they don't stop and panic. They keep going because they know people will still understand them. You can do that too. But it starts with changing the question in your head. Instead of preparing for failure, prepare for success. Instead of imagining embarrassment, imagine connection. Instead of asking, what if I mess up? Try asking, what if I get my point across? This is not just a cute idea. It's a mental habit you can train. The brain believes what you feed it. If you repeat fearful questions, the brain prepares for fear. If you repeat helpful, positive questions, the brain starts to calm down. It gets ready to engage, not to freeze. So how can you start practicing this? Try saying the new question out loud before a conversation. Literally speak to yourself and say, what if I get understood? Do this before you order food, before you answer a coworker, before you join a video call. Let the question guide your focus toward what matters, being understood. Another great time to ask this question is after you've spoken. Maybe you gave a short answer, or told a story, or tried to explain something. And then you stop and think, wait, did I make any mistakes? Instead of going down that path, ask, did they understand me? And if the answer is yes, then that's what counts. That's success. When you ask, what if I get understood? You're also giving yourself permission to be human. You're saying, I might not say it perfectly, but I can still say it. I might not know every word, but I can use what I know. This attitude lowers anxiety and builds confidence. I want to share a quick exercise you can do to make this shift more natural. Take a notebook or your phone and write down both questions. What if I make a mistake? And what if I get understood? Then, under each one, write how they make you feel. Do you feel more tense or more calm? More nervous or more brave? Just seeing the difference on paper can help you become more aware of how much your thoughts affect your voice. You can also make the new question your mantra. Put it on a sticky note, make it your phone wallpaper. Say it to yourself every morning. The more you hear it, the more your brain will accept it. Remember, every time you speak, you're doing something brave. You're choosing to communicate in another language. That takes courage. So don't waste that moment on fear. Feed your mind with better questions. Build a mental environment that helps you, not one that holds you back. Because in the end, English is not a performance. It's a bridge. And bridges are not perfect. They creak, they shake, they have cracks. But they still take you where you need to go. So next time you feel the nerves rising and that old question starts to appear, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what if I get understood? Let that be your guide. Let that be your focus. You'll be amazed how much it changes not just your English, but your whole experience of using it. Let me tell you about Layla from Egypt. She's one of those people who always loved learning languages, but English made her feel different. She grew up in Alexandria, where English was taught in school, but like many students, she focused more on passing exams than actually speaking the language. By the time she got to university, she could read and understand a lot. But when it came to speaking, her mind would go blank. Every time she thought about saying something in English, her heart would race. She worried about her pronunciation, her grammar, her accent. She told herself, "I'll practice when I'm better." But that day never came, until something changed. One evening, she was watching a video about confidence. The speaker mentioned the power of hearing your own voice. Not just speaking out loud, but actually listening to how you sound. It sounded a little strange at first, but something about it made sense to her. That night, Layla opened the voice recorder on her phone, pressed the red button, and said in English, "Hi, my name is Layla. I want to practice speaking more." Then she stopped the recording. She almost deleted it, but curiosity won. She pressed play and listened. Her first thought was, "Wow, I sound weird." Her second thought was, "But I did it." That small act, recording just one sentence, was the beginning of a new habit that would completely change her confidence in speaking English. The next day, she recorded again. This time, she talked for 30 seconds about what she ate for breakfast. The day after, she described her daily routine. At first, she felt awkward. She didn't like her voice. She noticed every little mistake. But she kept going. Not for anyone else, just for herself. After a few days, something interesting happened. Layla realized she was becoming more comfortable speaking. Not fluent, not perfect, but less afraid. She started noticing patterns in her speech. She repeated the same phrases, and that gave her clues about what vocabulary she used most. She started correcting herself gently after hearing how she said things. And most importantly, she stopped judging every word. She began to accept her voice in English the way she had accepted it in Arabic, as hers. She didn't need an audience. She didn't need a teacher. She didn't even need a partner. She just needed a quiet room, a phone, and her voice. After 2 weeks of daily voice messages, Layla took a bigger step. She sent one of her recordings to her cousin who lived in London. It was a short message saying, "Hey, I've been practicing my English like this. What do you think?" Her cousin replied with a voice message too, saying, "That's amazing, Layla. You sound great. Let's practice like this together." That was the first time Layla used English with another person without fear. What makes this story powerful is that it shows how building confidence doesn't always require a classroom or a partner or a big plan. Sometimes it starts with talking to yourself, talking out loud, hearing your voice in the language you're learning. It's a form of self-training, and it's also a way to build a relationship with English that feels personal, not performative. When you record your voice, you create a mirror, but instead of seeing your face, you hear your progress. You start small, maybe with just one sentence a day. And over time, those sentences grow. You get more comfortable, you get more fluent, and what's beautiful is that the pressure disappears. There's no one to impress, no one to judge, just you, your thoughts, and your voice. This method also helps with pronunciation and rhythm. When Layla started listening to her messages, she realized she was rushing her words. So she began to slow down. She listened more carefully to how she stressed different parts of the sentence. She even mimicked native speakers she admired and recorded herself trying to match their pace and intonation. She wasn't aiming for a perfect accent. She just wanted to be clear. And the more she practiced, the more clarity she found. Now, Layla uses this technique not just for practice, but for preparation. Before an interview, a meeting, or a presentation, she records a few voice messages to warm up. It's like stretching before a workout. It helps her relax and get into the mindset of speaking in English. You can try this too. It doesn't matter if your first recordings are messy or full of mistakes. That's not the point. The point is to get comfortable, to make your thoughts audible, to build that bridge between your thinking and your speaking. And if you stick with it, even for a few minutes a day, you'll notice something shift. You'll stop fearing your mistakes. You'll start celebrating your growth. One of Layla's favorite things now is listening to her old recordings. She saved them all in a folder on her phone. When she feels discouraged, she goes back to the very first one. That one short message. "Hi, my name is Layla. I want to practice speaking more." She listens to it, smiles, and remembers how far she's come. Not because she reached perfection, but because she didn't wait for perfection to start. This technique can work for anyone, anywhere in the world. Whether you're in a quiet apartment, on a walk, or even sitting in your car, just open your voice recorder, speak, and listen. You don't need a fancy setup. You don't need special tools. You just need a little bit of time and the courage to start. Because the more you hear yourself speak, the more natural it becomes. And when you feel comfortable with your own voice, you'll feel much more ready to share it with the world. So what do you do when you make a mistake while speaking English? Really, what's the best way to respond in the moment without freezing, panicking, or shutting down? Because mistakes will happen. They happen to everyone, even native speakers. And the way you react to them can make all the difference between building confidence or building more fear. Let's start with a simple truth. The way you respond to your own mistakes teaches your brain what to expect next time. If you react with panic or self-criticism, your brain connects mistakes with danger or embarrassment. But if you respond with calmness, humor, or curiosity, your brain starts to see mistakes as normal, even helpful. That's why it's important to have some ready-made responses you can use when you say something wrong. Think of them like little tools in your pocket. One of the most natural and friendly ways to fix a mistake is by saying, "Oops, I meant to say." For example, maybe you're talking to someone and you say, "I go to the office yesterday," and then you catch the error. You can simply smile and say, "Oops, I meant to say, I went to the office yesterday." This phrase is casual, human, and shows that you're paying attention. It doesn't sound like an apology. It sounds like a correction from someone who's comfortable learning. Another phrase that works really well is, "Let me try that again." Imagine you're explaining something and the sentence doesn't come out right. Instead of stopping completely or saying, "Sorry, my English is bad," you can just pause. Take a breath and say, "Let me try that again." Then you say it a second time, maybe more slowly or with simpler words. This shows confidence. It shows that you are the one in control of your learning, and you're not afraid to fix something on the spot. And sometimes the best response is just to laugh. Yes, really. Laughing at your own mistake can be a powerful way to take the pressure off. When you laugh at a word that came out wrong or a funny sentence that you didn't mean to say, it creates connection. It relaxes the person you're talking to, and it relaxes you. It says, "Hey, I'm still learning, and that's okay." Many fluent speakers do this all the time. It doesn't mean they're not smart or capable. It just means they're human. Think of moments when you've heard people laugh at themselves in conversation, in any language. It's a sign of comfort, not failure. It's not the mistake that people remember. It's how you handled it. Let's imagine a few quick examples. Picture Juan from Mexico. He's ordering food in a restaurant in Toronto. He says, "Can I have a glass of chicken?" Of course, he meant to say glass of water, but his brain mixed up the words. The waiter looks confused. Juan pauses, laughs, and says, "Oops, I meant water. I'm still waking up." Everyone laughs, the waiter smiles, and the tension disappears. That one moment became funny, not awkward. Or picture Amina from Kenya. She's giving a short presentation in English at work. She uses the word sensible when she means sensitive, and someone points it out gently. Amina smiles and says, "Let me try that again. I meant to say sensitive, not sensible." English can be tricky sometimes. By reacting calmly, she keeps the room relaxed, and more importantly, she keeps her confidence. And here's something important. When you show that you're okay with making mistakes, you actually become more relatable. People admire that kind of openness. It tells others, "I'm not perfect and that's fine." And it gives them permission to be imperfect too. This is a very human thing, and it builds trust. Now let's go a little deeper. Why does this really matter? Because for many learners, the fear of making a mistake is bigger than the mistake itself. The real fear is about what will happen after the mistake. Will people laugh at me? Will they correct me? Will I look stupid? These are natural questions, but most of the time, the answers are kinder than we imagine. People won't laugh. They might help. They might not even notice. And if they do notice, it's very likely they'll forget quickly, unless you make a big deal out of it. So if you can treat a mistake like a small bump in the road instead of a crash, you'll recover faster. The goal is not to avoid mistakes at all costs. The goal is to respond to them in a way that keeps you moving forward. You can even turn mistakes into learning moments. After a conversation, ask yourself, what went well? What could I say better next time? This helps your brain focus on growth, not just performance. It's not about judging yourself. It's about building awareness. And with awareness comes improvement. You might also try repeating your corrected sentences out loud. For example, if you accidentally said, he go to school, and then corrected yourself with, he goes to school, take a few seconds later in the day to repeat that correct version a few more times. That's how your brain starts to lock in the right form, not with fear or shame, but with simple repetition and practice. And one more thing, celebrate your recovery, not just your accuracy. In other words, feel proud not only when you say something perfectly, but also when you catch a mistake and fix it without freezing. That's a real skill. That's a sign of growth. Every time you say, oops, I meant to say, or let me try that again, you're building a powerful habit that will serve you for years to come. So next time a mistake slips out, and it will, remember this. Breathe, smile, fix it, and move on. The mistake doesn't define you. The way you handle it does. You know what we don't do often enough when learning a new language? We forget to celebrate. We wait for the big moment, like giving a perfect presentation in English or sounding completely fluent, before we allow ourselves to feel proud. But the truth is, progress in English is built on small wins. Those quiet, personal moments that seem small on the outside but are actually huge steps forward. Think about it. The first time you understood a full sentence in a movie without subtitles. The first time you ordered coffee and the barista didn't ask you to repeat. The first time you had a short conversation with a stranger and walked away, thinking, wow, I did it. Those are wins, and they matter more than we realize. When we celebrate small wins, we build confidence. And confidence is fuel. It gives us energy to keep going, especially when the learning process feels slow or frustrating. Learning a language isn't like flipping a switch. It's like building a muscle. You don't go to the gym once and expect to be strong. You get stronger with consistency, with repetition, and by noticing the improvements along the way. Let me tell you about Rina from Indonesia. She used to feel invisible in her English class because she wasn't the best speaker. Every time she made a mistake, she would shrink into herself. One day, she was watching a TV show and suddenly understood a joke without looking at the subtitles. It made her laugh out loud. That tiny moment gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt before. She realized, maybe I'm doing better than I think. From that point on, she started writing down her wins, even the small ones. I understood the radio today. I talked to a tourist in English and didn't panic. Her confidence grew with every note she added. Celebrating small wins isn't just about feeling good. It changes the way your brain sees learning. Our brains respond to rewards. Every time you feel successful, even in a tiny way, your brain releases chemicals that make you want to do it again. That's how habits are built, not through punishment or pressure, but through positive reinforcement. I want you to ask yourself this. When was the last time you celebrated your English progress? Not just noticed it, but really celebrated it. Did you smile to yourself? Did you tell a friend? Did you write it down somewhere to remember it later? Let's go through a few examples of what small wins look like, because sometimes we're making progress and we don't even see it. Imagine you're in a foreign city. You need directions and you manage to ask someone how to get to the train station. They understand you. That's a win. You're listening to a podcast in English, and for the first time, you don't need to pause every few seconds to understand. That's a win. You send a message in English without using a translator. You might check it later and see a small mistake, but the fact that you wrote it freely, that's a win. You join a conversation online, maybe on social media, and you comment in English. Even if it's short, that's interaction. That's bravery. That's a win. You pronounce a word correctly that you struggled with for weeks. That's a win. And here's the thing. No one else has to recognize it. You don't need someone to clap for you or give you a gold star. The most powerful kind of celebration is the one that comes from inside. When you stop and say, that was me. I did that. I'm proud of myself. Your brain listens. Your confidence grows quietly but powerfully. Let's not forget the emotional side of learning. It's easy to focus only on vocabulary and grammar and forget that learning English is also an emotional journey. You're stepping out of your comfort zone. You're trying to connect with people in a second language. That takes courage. Every time you do something in English that you wouldn't have dared to do a month ago, that is worth celebrating. And you can create your own way of celebrating. Some people like to keep a journal. Others reward themselves with something small, like a walk in the park or a favorite treat. Some people tell their friends or post about it online. It doesn't matter how you celebrate. What matters is that you take a moment to recognize your effort. You don't have to wait until you're fluent to feel successful. In fact, if you wait that long, you might never feel good enough. Fluency is a moving target. It changes as your goals change. But celebrating small wins keeps you motivated, grounded, and aware of how far you've come. Let me share a quick story about Emre from Turkey. He always dreamed of working in tourism, but his English held him back. One day, while volunteering at a local event, he greeted some English-speaking visitors. He introduced himself, gave directions, and answered a few questions. Later, he told a friend, "I didn't use perfect grammar, but they understood me, and I wasn't afraid." That night, he went home and wrote in his notebook, "Today, I used English in real life. I was nervous, but I did it." That sentence became his favorite reminder. Whenever he felt stuck, he'd look at it and remember, progress is already happening. You have your own stories like this. Maybe you haven't written them down yet, but they're there. Moments where you were brave, where you understood something new, where you spoke up when it felt risky. Those are the building blocks of fluency. So, from now on, I want you to keep your eyes open for these moments. Look for them every day. Say to yourself, that was a win. Even if it seems small. Especially if it seems small. Because enough small wins over time create something big. One of the most powerful things you can do to improve your English and to grow your confidence is to surround yourself with people who support your journey. When you're learning a language, especially as an adult, it can feel lonely. You're working through fears, doubts, and frustrations that sometimes other people in your life don't understand. That's why joining a community that values practice, encouragement, and progress over perfection can make a world of difference. Here in the English Talk community, we believe that learning should feel human, not like a test. We created this space because we knew so many people were struggling in silence. They were afraid of speaking, afraid of being judged, afraid of sounding silly. But when you're around others who are also learning, also trying, and also making mistakes, suddenly it feels safer to speak. It feels normal to get things wrong. It feels okay to be in progress. When you join a supportive community, you're no longer learning alone. You're learning with others who celebrate your progress, encourage your efforts, and remind you that it's okay to stumble. You see people from different backgrounds and nationalities pushing through the same struggles, and that makes your journey feel less personal and more universal. Let me tell you about Mateo from Argentina. He used to practice English only by himself. He watched videos, repeated phrases, studied grammar. But when it came time to speak, he froze. He didn't have anyone to talk to. One day, he joined an online English group where learners from around the world met once a week just to chat. The first time he spoke, his voice shook. He was nervous, but no one laughed. Instead, someone from India said, "I used to feel the same way." Another person from Poland added, "You sound great. Keeps going." That moment changed everything for Mateo. For the first time, he didn't feel judged. He felt seen. And that gave him the courage to keep practicing, to make more mistakes, and to grow faster than he ever did alone. There is something powerful that happens when you see other people in the process of learning. It reminds you that perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. It reminds you that everyone has their own accent, their own rhythm, their own insecurities. And yet, they still show up. They still try. And that gives you permission to do the same. Inside supportive communities like the English Talk community, learners share their wins, their questions, their funny mistakes. And they also share advice, encouragement, and resources that can help. Others? It becomes a circle of support. And when you support someone else, you learn even more yourself. Teaching is learning. Encouraging someone else makes you stronger too. You might be wondering, but what if I'm too shy to join a group? That's completely normal. You don't have to speak on your first day. You can listen, observe, read what others are sharing. Then, when you feel ready, you can type a message, join a conversation, or leave a comment. Step by step, your confidence will grow. There are so many ways to connect with others. You can join an online group, a local language exchange, or even use apps that connect learners through short conversations. You can also participate in comment sections of English podcasts, YouTube channels, or even forums where learners ask questions and share advice. The important thing is that you put yourself in environments where English feels alive, real, and human. Supportive communities are not about being perfect. They are about practicing without pressure. They're about feeling understood, even when you can't find the right word. They're about celebrating when someone says their first full sentence or when someone asks their first question out loud. Every little step is a big deal when you're surrounded by people who get it. Think of it like learning to swim. Would you rather learn in a pool with others who are also beginners, with friendly instructors who cheer you on? Or would you rather be thrown into the deep ocean alone? Of course, you'd want the pool. A safe space. A place where mistakes are expected, where laughter is part of learning. That's what a good language community feels like. Let me share one more story with you. Amina from Morocco had always loved English, but she never used it in conversation. She felt too embarrassed. She didn't think her pronunciation was good enough. One day, she found the English Talk Community podcast and began listening regularly. She heard people from around the world with all kinds of accents sharing their stories. She realized that being understood mattered more than sounding perfect. Eventually, she joined an online chat where learners left short voice messages. She recorded her first message after 30 minutes of hesitation. It wasn't perfect, but it was her. And the first reply she received was, "Thank you for sharing. You inspired me." That was all she needed to keep going. This is why we do what we do here. To create a space where people like Amina, like Mateo, and like you can practice, speak, and grow. We all want to feel brave enough to use English in real life, at work, while traveling, or just meeting someone new. And we become braver when we know we're not alone. So wherever you are in your English journey, I encourage you to look around. Find a community, online, offline, big or small, that makes you feel supported. One that reminds you that making mistakes is part of learning. One that makes you want to try, even when you're nervous. One that gives you the courage to speak up. Because the truth is, language is about people. It's about connection. And connection needs community. If you've been listening to this episode and thinking, yes, I want to feel more confident speaking English, then I have a question for you. What's one small thing you can try today? Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because sometimes we wait too long for the perfect moment to begin. We think we need to study a little more, feel a little braver, or wait for a big opportunity. But the truth is, progress begins with something small. It begins with one simple action. So I want to invite you right now to think of just one thing you can do today to use your English. Maybe it's as easy as saying good morning to someone in English. Maybe you order a coffee using a full English sentence. Maybe you record a voice message to yourself, like Layla from Egypt did. It doesn't have to be complicated. The only rule is, you do it today. Small actions create momentum, and once you begin, it becomes easier to keep going. If you say good morning in English today, tomorrow you might say, good morning, how are you? And the day after, maybe you answer a question at work or help someone who's lost in your city. The confidence builds quietly, step by step. Let me tell you something that happened to Amir, a medical student from Jordan. He used to think he needed a full plan to improve his English. He kept telling himself he would start practicing next month, after exams, when he had more time. One evening, after listening to this podcast, he asked himself, what can I do today? He was too tired to study, too busy to join a class, but he decided to switch his phone's language to English. That was it. One simple change. The next day, he noticed a few new words. He had to think a little more while using apps, but just that one change reminded him of his goal every day. It pulled English into his routine, and it started with a choice he made in less than a minute. So I'm going to ask you again, what's one thing you can try today? Think of something that feels light, easy, gentle. It could be reading a short English post on social media and leaving a comment. It could be introducing yourself in English in front of a mirror. It could be asking your coworker, how was your weekend? In English. Maybe you've been nervous to speak in a group. That's okay. Then maybe today is the day you write a message instead of speaking it out loud. Or maybe you practice with AI or talk to yourself while walking home. The key is to start where you are. If your English is very basic, celebrate the basics. If your English is strong but you lack confidence, choose something that pushes you gently forward. It's not about impressing anyone. It's not about being fluent overnight. It's about building your relationship with English in small, personal, and consistent ways. We often think that growth comes from big, dramatic steps, but real progress is usually quiet. It happens when you practice something small, over and over. It happens when you show up for yourself even when you don't feel ready. It happens when you take one small step forward instead of waiting for the perfect moment. Let's take a moment right now. Close your eyes or just take a deep breath and think of your one action. What feels possible today? What feels doable in the next hour? Choose something that brings English into your world without stress. And once you've chosen it, commit to it, even if you feel nervous. Even if it feels too small to matter, it matters. That small action you take today might be the reason you feel more confident tomorrow. I remember a message we received from Min, a teacher from Vietnam. She said her first small action was reading this podcast transcript out loud while she walked around her apartment. She didn't record herself. She didn't share it. It was just for her. But she said that speaking English in motion, with no pressure, helped her feel free. It became a daily routine. And after a few weeks, her voice sounded different, brighter, more relaxed. That's the power of small daily actions. So whatever your one action is, take it seriously. Not because it's big, but because it's yours. If it helps, say it out loud right now. Say, "Today, I'm going to say hello to my neighbor in English." Or, "Today, I'm going to write a short sentence about my day." Maybe even, "Today, I'm going to press play on an English video and repeat 2 sentences." That's enough. That's already a win. There is no perfect way to practice English. The perfect way is the one that you actually do. The one that feels like a match for your life today. Not the life you wish you had. Not the life you imagine. In the future. But the real, messy, beautiful life you're living right now. And I'll tell you a secret. The learners who improve the most are not the ones who try to be perfect. They're the ones who keep showing up. Who keep trying, even when it's awkward. Who keep speaking, even when they make mistakes. They treat English like a daily companion, not a final exam. And that's what I want for you too. Because when English becomes a part of your daily life, when you read it, hear it, speak it, even just for a few minutes, it begins to feel familiar. Less scary, more natural. And soon, the fear of making mistakes is replaced with the joy of expressing yourself. That's what happens when you take small, brave steps. So if you're still wondering how to start, I'll leave you with one final idea. After this episode ends, take 1 minute and say out loud something simple about your day in English. Maybe, "Today I listened to a podcast about learning English." Or, "I want to feel more confident speaking English." That's it. That's your practice. You're not waiting anymore. You're doing it. As we come to the end of this episode, I want to take a moment to bring everything together. Today, we explored something so important for every English learner around the world: the fear of making mistakes. That quiet voice in your head that says, "What if I say it wrong?" Or, "What if they don't understand me?" is a voice we all know. It doesn't matter where you're from, how old you are, or what your job is. That fear is something nearly every learner faces. And that's why today's conversation matters so much. Because we're not here to aim for perfection. We're here to grow, to communicate, and to enjoy the process of becoming more confident in English, one step at a time. You heard stories about Haruto from Japan, Carla from Brazil, Alex from Germany, and Layla from Egypt. Each of them faced their own fears in their own way, and each of them discovered something powerful: that progress begins when we stop trying to be perfect and start practicing with courage. Whether it was a mistake in a meeting, a funny moment at a pizza place, or a voice message recorded alone at home, their breakthroughs happened not because everything went smoothly, but because they were willing to try, willing to make a mistake, willing to learn from it. So here's what I want you to remember. First, do not be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are not signs of failure. They are signs of movement. They mean you're trying. They mean you're using what you've learned. They mean you're in the game. Every fluent speaker you admire has made thousands of mistakes along the way, and they still make them. Even native speakers make mistakes. The goal is not to speak without errors. The goal is to speak and be understood. That is where real communication happens. Second, use simple sentences. Speak clearly and naturally the way you would speak to a friend. You don't need fancy grammar or big vocabulary to sound smart. In fact, the opposite is often true. The clearer you are, the more confident and intelligent you sound. Practice. Saying everyday phrases. Talk about your life in a simple way. Describe what you're doing. Share your opinions. Ask questions. Language is about connection, not complexity. Third, practice without pressure. This is your journey. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to be perfect on day one or even year one. All you need is a space where you feel safe to try. That's what we're building here at the English Talk Community. A space for learners like you to feel supported, heard, and understood. A place where you can listen, learn, and grow without fear. And now, as we close, I want to leave you with a question. Think about it. Reflect on it. What's one mistake you're no longer afraid to make? Maybe you used to worry about confusing he and she. Maybe you were afraid of forgetting a word in the middle of a sentence. Maybe you avoided speaking because of your accent. But something has shifted. You've learned. You've practiced. You've taken a step forward. So, what is one mistake that no longer scares you? I'd love to hear from you. You can send us a message or leave a comment and let us know your answer. Your story could inspire someone else who's going through the same thing. And if this episode helped you, even just a little, I want to ask you a small favor. Follow our podcast if you haven't already. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We release new ones regularly, and each one is designed to give you confidence, motivation, and practical tools to speak English with ease. And if you know someone else who's learning English, and a friend, a coworker, a family member, share this podcast with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. You can also go back and listen to other episodes in our library. Each one explores a different topic in your English journey, always with real stories, simple advice, and a warm community feel. If you liked today's focus on speaking without fear, you'll probably enjoy episodes on thinking in English, building fluency, or expanding your vocabulary naturally. And remember, you don't have to listen all at once. You can listen while you walk, while you drive, while you cook. Any moment can become a practice moment. Finally, I want to remind you that you are not alone. There are millions of people around the world who are on this same journey. Some are beginners, some are advanced, some are confident, and some are still shy. But all of them are learning. All of them are trying. And many of them are here, listening with you, part of the English Talk community. We're so glad to have you with us. So whether today's episode made you smile, helped you relax, or gave you the push to try something new, I'm proud of you. You showed up. You listened. You thought about your learning. And maybe, just maybe, you're about to do something in English today that you were too scared to try yesterday. Let me know when you're ready for the next project or if you'd like help planning your next episode.